We've all seen on television when there's a hurricane down in the south, Texas, Florida Panhandle, wherever it might be in the south. And we see these brave souls, and sometimes I think they're kind of crazy a little bit, these weather folks that get out there and they lean into this wind. And we all know that a wind gets a name at around 75 miles per hour. I remember there was a gentleman, I was speaking at Los Alamos National Laboratory some years back. We talked about the moment. A very high-ranking individual at Atlanta came up to me afterwards out in the parking lot, and I was getting ready to get in my car and get back to Albuquerque to get the plane, come back to BWI. And he began to share with me this moment. He then, as he shared this, he began to share about this whole idea of wind. And he says that what happened as a young man when I became aware about what was happening, that people hated me just because of the color of my skin. He said, it's like this hurricane force wind came up, that my consciousness, in a sense, almost, didn't create it, but it became aware of this wind for the first time. And he said, I began to learn as a young man how to lean into that wind, spiritually, almost physically, emotionally. And I learned how to deal with it. And somehow I could retain my sense of humor a little bit. Somehow I still had a sense of myself. But that's how I could cope. So I got a tour in Japan. Wouldn't you know it? He said, as soon as I got off the plane, it's like the wind stopped. Now, a little sidebar. If you're Korean in Japan, you're feeling the wind big time. But as an African American, he said the wind stopped for him. He said about 3 or 4 weeks later, after being on this tour, he says, I was out to dinner, and he says, we had some folks come from the headquarters to visit us. He said, wouldn't you know it? The wind picked up in that restaurant. I felt it again. It was weird. And then he paused. No BS kind of guy. And he looked me square in the eye. Every one of us here have received compliments. This is probably one of the finest compliments I've ever received. He said, for some reason, I don't feel any wind coming from you. Ladies and gentlemen, it tore me up. It tore me up. I got in my car. It's about a 2-hour drive, I guess 2.5-hour drive back to Albuquerque. I had to stop a couple of times because the tears in my eyes. It was there. I made a covenant. I said, I never want to sponsor the wind in anybody's life. I'm going to start with my wife, my kids, my neighbors, folks at church. I want this to spread out cross-culturally. Age, religion, gender. And if I do sponsor the wind, or when I sponsor the wind, I want to be man enough to admit it and go to the people who've experienced it from me and ask for forgiveness.